All right, so today's work is basically being able to understand how to convert and compare different types of unit measure. So let's begin. For this lesson, we need to be able to change units from one unit to another. For example, centimeters to meters, but then also going backwards as well. And then meters to kilometers, but then also go back as well to meters. And also millimeters to centimeters, but then also be able to go back to millimeters. And then we need to be able to compare different lengths and based on that, decide which one is bigger and larger. And that's what our comparison part is about. So how do we know if we understand? Well, you'll be able to change all of these different lengths, making them bigger to bigger lengths, and then also going backwards as well. And then we'll be able to also take a look at comparisons as well. So today what we're going to do is we're going to start with changing millimeters to centimeters because millimeters is our smallest and our next biggest is centimeters. So what we're going to do is we're going to write millimeters and centimeters below it. Now, when we are going back from the higher one, we're literally going to be multiplying by 10. When we are transferring stuff from millimeters to centimeters, we must take our millimeters and divide by 10. So here are some examples. 1, 5.3 centimeters, and we're going to change that into millimeters. So based on our little chart here, to go from centimeters to millimeters, we have to go up. So when we're going up, we have to times what we're doing by 10. So essentially, when we times something by 10, we move the decimal in 5.3 over one spot. So instead of 5.3, we're going to have 53 millimeters. Let's try again, 2. Let's say we have 66.3 centimeters, and we're going to go and turn that into millimeters. Pause the video and do your own. So remember, we times by 10, and then timesing by 10 moves our decimal place over 1. So now 6.3 becomes 63. Let's do a third one, but this time we're going to go backwards. So imagine we have, say, 82 millimeters, and we need to change that into centimeters. Now, for the first one, when we times them, we moved the decimal right 1. This time, we're actually looking at our chart, and we have to go from millimeters back down into centimeters. So when we're doing that, what happens is we're going to be dividing by 10. So that means we have to identify where the decimal is. And for the decimal on the 82, if there's nothing there, we always assume the decimal is right here. So I'll just write that in red. So for this one, there's my decimal. And in order to change it over to our new number, we have to divide by 10, which means we need to move this decimal here right 1 space. So now our new number is 8, and then we have our decimal in between the 2 and the 8. So we have 8.2 centimeters. Let's do a fourth one. So now let's say that we have, say, 642 millimeters. And we're going to go and change that to centimeters. So we do our math again. We know that we're going to be dividing by 10, which means our decimal moves over to the right 1. So now our answer is going to be 64.2. So remember, for these problems here, we are always moving the decimal left 1 space. That's it. That's it for that. So now the next problem that we're going to do is we're going to convert centimeters to meters. So now we're going to use the same concept as before. The smaller measure is going to be on the top, and then we have meters on the bottom. So when we have that, this is what's happening. Take a moment and draw these arrows. Now, when we are going from meters back to centimeters, this means that we're timesing by 100, because for every 100 centimeters, there's exactly 1 meter. So that means we're moving to the right 2. Now, if we're moving from centimeters to meters, we are also going to be, instead of timesing by 100, we're going to divide by 100, which means we're moving the decimal to the left 2. So now, pause the video, take a look at these questions. All right, for 5 meters, this is a peculiar question because we're going from meters to centimeters. Because there's not enough space here, I'm just going to write this to the right. I'm going to write the number in the space. So I got a 5. And with our 5, you need to remember your 5 has a decimal just after it, right? So we are moving this to the right a certain amount. So here's what we do for this question here. For 5, we are literally moving our decimal to the right to the left, right 2 spaces. 1, 2. So 5 really means if there's 2 spaces to the right, that means there's 2 zeros to the right of 5. So that means we have 500. So the next one, 7.23. We're going to move our decimal 7.23 meters. And we need to move it to the right 2. 1, 2. So our final answer is going to be 723. Now, for 830 centimeters, we're going to do the same thing again, except instead of moving to the right, we're moving to the left. So we start here at 830. There's our decimal. And we're moving it into meters. So we need to move it to the left. 1, 2. So our answer, our decimal in our new number is going to be between the 8 and the 3. So we write 8.30 meters. And we do the same again for the next one, 93. 93, there's where our decimal is. If it was there, you just move it over. You just follow it. 1, 2 spots. So our decimal is here. So if I write this, I would write 0.93, and that's not correct, so we need to put a 0 in front, and we're done. So now we're going to convert meters to kilometers, and if you think about this, the smaller one is going to be the meters. So there's our meters, there's our kilometers, and we'll set up our calculations. Now, what you really need to know is that when we are going from kilometers to meters, you need to remember this. there's 1,000 meters for every kilometer. So that means we have to times our kilometers by 1,000 to get the meters. So this means we're moving our decimal to the right 3. So if you haven't figured it out yet, you look at the number of zeros that you're multiplying by and move that by the number of zeros. And now for our meters to kilometers, we must divide by 1,000, which means we need to move the decimal to the left 3 spots anytime we see these questions. So now here is your problem. All right, so for the first one, 32 kilometers. Remember, we're going from kilometers to meters. So that means we need to move the decimal 3 spots. So if we look at 32, I would write 32 here. And then if you want, what you can do is you can imagine that you figure out where your decimal is. I just sort of put it underneath my line and I go 1, move it to the right 1. That's 1 spot, 2 spots, 3 spots. So now, because there's a decimal right here, we want to put 3 zeros where our loops are, and we're good. So let's do the same again for 3.53. 3.53, what you can do, just to make your life easy, write 3, 5, 3, where you're going to do your math. And then what you do, you could write underneath here, find your decimal spot, and then just move the decimal over 3 spots. And that's where our new decimal is. So now I'm just going to write 3, 5, 3, and then a 0 where one of the loops is missing. Okay, and we could do the same similar thing for 5,200. So for 5,200, I would write my number 5,200 in my space here. This will save you some time. You know your decimal is to the right of the last spot. So now we're just going to move this to the right 3 spots because, like we said here, if we're moving from meters to kilometers, we move the decimal left 3 spaces. So our answer is 5.200. So I'm just going to put my decimal right there. Now we'll do the last one, 2,100. I'm going to write 2,100 here and then move my decimal to the right 3 spots. So my decimal's to the right here. I'm just going to move it over 3 spots. And my answer is going to be right where my decimal is. So my decimal is going to be 2.100 kilometers. And we're done. I want you to practice the questions that are on the sheet here. If you have any questions, or after you finish question number 1, ask me about question number 2. So now let's go and summarize what we've learned. So what we'll do here is we'll make sure that we show how we change these from millimeters all the way to kilometers. So if you ever have to go and change a bunch of numbers in order to get go from, say, kilometers here all the way down to millimeters, you should be able to do it because you have all the different stages that you'd have to do to make those calculations. Now, from here to here, from kilometers to meters, we times by 1,000, which means we move to the right 3. From meters to centimeters, we times by 100, which means we move to the right 2. If we go from centimeters to millimeters, it means we times by 10, which means we move to the right 1 space. So now, let's say we're going from millimeters to centimeters. That means we divide by 10, which means we move to the left 1. Going from centimeters to meters, you need to divide by 100, which means you move to the left 2. Anytime I'm talking about moving something to the left, we're talking about the decimal. And then we do the same for meters to kilometers. So instead of timesing by 3, we're going to divide by 1,000 this time. And we're going to move it to the left 3. And that's what your work is. If you have different measures, you must change them to the same thing. So if I asked you, which is bigger? If I asked you which is bigger, 1.5 meters or 153 centimeters, we would have to use this chart here to change one of these either into centimeters or into meters. So I like changing stuff from meters into centimeters. So this part here, 1.5 meters, is really 150 centimeters. So I would say that this one is less than 153 centimeters, and it's less than or greater than. Just make sure then when you use these signs, these signs for less than or greater, you do that, or you circle the one which is bigger. So I would circle that if I was wanting you to tell me that this one is bigger or that one's bigger. All right, your homework's online. Do those questions. And try to send them back to me as well.